So for exercise 4, you'll notice that it doesn't have very many tasks, but within each task there's quite a few things that you have to do. So we've kept it short so that you guys learn the proper way to submit a project after the mix has been finalized. A couple of things that are important to note. If you notice here, I have it right at the top of the PDF, and you'll also see it in the FSO activity because I want you guys to realize this before you get started. Um, for exercise 4, the assets that you're going to be preparing are going to be off of the final mix project Pro Tools session, not from the Frey the Eon Pro Tools session that you have been using for the exercises up until now. So make sure that you're using your final project session to create these assets. The next important thing is pre-task 1 over here. You'll notice I highlighted it in yellow because it is very important. So you want to make sure that your file structure for your folders should look like this, right? And in week 1, we took care of this. So you guys submitted some screenshots showing me how everything looked for your exercise session. But at this point, you should have, if you'll notice here, you have your MXT folder, and then you have your 4 folders here, 2 for the raw files for each session, 1 for the final project session and 1 for the exercise session, and then your 2 session folders, 1 for the exercise session and then 1 for the final project session. What I'm most concerned with is what the final project session structure, the hierarchy looks like. So if it's not looking like this, at this point, I want you guys to realize that it's important that if you're about to change anything in terms of the names of your folders or the location of your folders because excuse me, because they don't look like this, make sure you close down Pro Tools. I can't tell you how many times every month I get students that they're submitting their projects properly all month, and then for some reason their hierarchy isn't exactly the way that it looks here, and they start changing the names on their files or changing the location of things while Pro Tools is open, and that breaks the link of the audio files, so that I'm not able to actually hear your session or link the audio files to your session. So it's very important that you close down Pro Tools and rearrange everything so that the screenshot that you are submitting for your final project session looks this way. Keep in mind also that this activity or exercise 4, if you look on FSO, you'll notice that it's unweighted. So there is no weight for this exercise. There is no there's nothing to submit on this activity. But what's important is that you create the assets off your final project, because you do have to submit a portion of these assets for your final project submission activity. So don't just say, oh, it's unweighted, I'm not going to do it, it doesn't matter, I'll just click complete and skip it, because you're going to be missing out on some of the things that you have to create for your final project submission. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward. Pretest 2 is just telling you to create a new version of the Pro Tools session as you've been doing throughout the month. Make sure you do save as and then name it EO4. And then we jump into task 1, which is printing the mix stems. So printing the mix stems, what you're going to be doing is basically creating stereo bounces of each different section of instruments within your mix, right? So you're going to be creating, for example, a mix stem for your drums, a mix stem for your bass, your percussion, whatever, however many subgroups and then individual tracks that you have within your session, you're going to be creating mix stems for those particular groups of tracks. And task 1 is centered around showing you how to create those particular mix stems. So I've pulled up one of my student sessions, one of the better ones, so that I could show you guys how to create this. Keep in mind though that even though many of you have chosen the same song, not all of your sessions are going to look exactly the same. They're not going to have the same colors. The tracks are going to be maybe grouped a little bit differently, and that's okay. Um, you guys had a bit of freedom on how you could group certain things. Obviously, freedom within certain limitations, right? Um, but let's say in this case, I pull up this session. This is my session, and it looks here like I want to create a mix stem for all of my groups of tracks and then all of the individual tracks. So if I scroll through here, and you can actually see here in the mix group, this is mix groups. This is a good idea, right, of what it should look like. But you would be creating, in this case, you could create a list so that you don't forget which ones you're creating it or which mix stems you're creating. But you could scroll down and basically create the list by looking at your session, right? So you can see here that you can create a drum mix stem. You could come here and then create a percussion mix stem, right? Notice that these two tracks are, or a few of these tracks are individual tracks. So then you're going to have to create a mix stem for that individual track. So you'd create a bass mix stem, an acoustic guitar mix stem, a banjo mix stem, a mandolin, right? So all the way down the line, you're going to figure out exactly what are the mix stems that you're creating. Again, remember, for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, especially if you didn't choose this song. But this is just an example of the process that you're going through. So to create my first mix stem, first thing you want to do is to select all of the tracks that you're not going to be recording at the moment. So if I'm creating the drum mix stem, I'm going to highlight all of my tracks from the percussion all the way down to, so I'll click on the first percussion track all the way down to the last Vox ad-libs track, right? So even the click, right? So I could highlight all of these audio tracks, and what I'm going to do is inactivate them, right? So I want to make them inactive. Now, an easy way to do this would be to use your all audio tracks mix group, right? So if you click on that one, on the color of the mix group, it's going to highlight all of the audio tracks in your session, right? And notice that I'm saying audio tracks and not also including the aux tracks in there. Keep in mind that it's important to, when you're making certain tracks inactive, and in this case you're making all of the tracks that are not the drums inactive, you want to make sure that you keep especially the time-based aux tracks out of it, right? You want to keep those active all the time in case there are certain elements that are being sent to those tracks. If you accidentally make those inactive also, then your mix stems are all going to sound dry with no effects on them, and that's not the purpose of this whole thing, right? The purpose is to record down onto two tracks whatever processing you have on those particular tracks, and that could mean EQs, compressors, dynamic processors, time-based effects, multipaths, stuff like that. So you got to be aware of these things. So I clicked on the color of my all audio tracks mix group. It highlighted all of my audio tracks, but now I have to go back and deselect by holding down the command key and deselect all the drum tracks, right, because I don't want to include those. And then you're going to hold shift option down and click on the name of the first selected track, or any of the selected tracks, by holding shift option down, and right click on the name, and then choose from the list, choose make inactive. That's going to make, you'll notice here that now it made all of those audio tracks inactive, which means that no audio is going to be heard from those tracks. Now the reason we're making them inactive as opposed to just muting them is because at this point a lot of you have added some automation on the tracks, and some of you may have added mute automation on certain tracks within your session, which would mean that even if you muted those tracks that have automation, mute automation on them, they'll go back to being unmuted and start reading the automation on the tracks. So to prevent that, what we're doing is making all of our audio tracks that are not being recorded down, uh, we're making them inactive, so nothing happens or nothing passes through them. But notice that all of the aux tracks are still active, right? All of the aux tracks are active, and then in this session I don't have any time-based effects at the moment, but you would also see those here at the end. Those would be active also, making sure that you're still recording the effects coming back through those aux tracks. So I have my drum tracks all ready to go. Now you're going to pull up the memory locations window, and you're going to be using the final mix selection memory location that you've used for your checkpoints, and in this week for the peer review activity also. So if we go over to the edit window, when I click on that final mix selection, it should highlight my mix the same length that I've been using throughout the month. Keep in mind that it should start right at the top of the song, right? So we shouldn't be cutting off anything at the top, and most importantly, we shouldn't be cutting off anything at the end, and that includes the effects. So sometimes the effects or even the instruments take a while to die out or to decay completely, and you want to make sure that you're grabbing all of that decay all the way at the end of the song. So make sure that you're highlighting the correct portion for your final mix. So I have it highlighted for the drums, right? And I'm going to go up to File, Bounce to Disk, right? And that's for the quick key, it's Option Command B, right? So you'll see here it shows you what the quick key is. So bounce to disk. In the bounce to disk folder, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to my main output. So in this case, for me, it's the built-in output because that's what I'm using. But you want to make sure that this is showing whatever the main output of your mix is, right? So wherever all of the audio is coming out, that is what is going to be showing up here in the bounce source. You're going to be creating a wave, so a high resolution. Make sure that it's interleaved, and make sure that this bit depth and this sample rate, so for all of you it's going to be a little bit different. Make sure that the bit depth and the sample rate mirrors the settings for your session. So if we cancel this and we go up here to set up session, you'll see that mine says 2444.1, right? So I want to make sure that when I do bounce to disk, that this mirrors those session settings, so 2444.1 in this case, but for some of you it's going to be different. Make sure that you're matching that. It's very important to match that. Now the naming of the file, if we go over to the PDF, we'll see here that it says name it in this fashion: artist name, song title, mix stem, right? So the mix stem being whatever stem I'm printing at the moment or recording at the moment. So in this case it would be Jonathan Royer, right? Because that's the song I'm using. That could be us, and this would be drum stem or drums stem, drum stem. And then choose where you're saving it. Now this is another important one. If we look here, I've shown you exactly where it needs to be saved. So you're creating a stems or a mixed stems folder inside of the bounce files folder for the Pro Tools session, and I've given you a picture of what it should look like. So if we come over here, you can choose where to save it, right? So choose, I'm looking for that particular, so this is just a sample of what I'm doing here, right? So last name, first name, final mix project, artist name, song title. There's my final session. There's the bounce files. And let's say you don't have a folder in there already created, you can navigate down to the bottom left, or bottom left hand corner of the window and choose new folder, and you can create it right inside here. I already have it there, so I'm going to make sure that all of my mix stems are saved inside of this folder. So open, and then the last important thing is make sure that offline is checked. Offline is going to let you bounce the drums down, or any of the mix stems that you create. It's going to let you bounce them down, not in real time, right? So it's going to go a lot faster, so you don't have to wait the whole length of the song. And when I bounce this down, when I hit bounce, notice that it goes a lot quicker than what the actual song is. It finishes bouncing, and then what I want you to do, I want all of you to do, is go over to navigate to that window, right? So we're navigating to where I just saved it, bounced files, mix stems, and there it is, right? So you do this for a few reasons. You want to make sure that not only is it named correctly, that you saved it in the right spot, but then you also want to make sure that you listen to the song, right? So just highlight the track and then press spacebar on the file, and it'll start playing. And this is to ensure that you're hearing everything properly, that you're not hearing the click in there by accident, that you're not hearing any weird ghost effects from other instruments in there, that you're not hearing other instruments like the vocals or the bass in there. So make sure that all of your stems are created properly. And you want to repeat this process for all of your mix stems, right? So once you're done with this one, you want to repeat the process for the next tracks, right? So in this case, what would you do? You'd hold Option down, unhighlight all of the tracks, right? So make sure that they're all unhighlighted. You're now going to deactivate the drums, right? So you select the first drum track, hold down Shift, select the last drum track, and then holding Shift Option down, right click on the whichever drum track, and then make inactive. So now you've made them all inactive, but now you want to activate the next mix stem that you're creating. In this case, I'd be creating the perc, or the percussion mix stem. So I'd highlight the tracks that I want to make it active, and then right click and make active, and now I have these tracks, and this is where the process starts to begin again, right? So from here you'd make sure that everything is highlighted properly, right? And then you'd go and do bounce to disk all the way down the line till you finish all of your mix stems. Hopefully that all makes sense, because the next task is pretty much the same thing, except you're creating what is called the Gang of Four. Now the Gang of Four, it enables the engineer, or usually the mastering engineer, to do quick fixes on certain mixes, on the mix, right? So we're having you create a full mix, a TV mix, an instrumental mix, and an a cappella mix. And these create a sense of like a quick mix with certain elements, right? So each of these contains certain elements within each mix that helps in many specific situations that we go over, not only in the lessons videos, but also in the FSO activity. I go over where some of these mixes could be used. Now the process is exactly the same in terms of creating them. You just want to make sure that you're including all of the proper elements for each one, right? So it goes a little bit further. And these are going to be saved in the, if you noticed here, in the hierarchy folder, you'll notice that there's a Gang of Four folder, right? So we call these the Gang of Four, and you can save those inside of the Gang of Four folder. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, the Gang of Four folder, or there's, for this unweighted exercise, even though it's unweighted, a portion of the assets are required for your final project submission, and the Gang of Four are the assets that are required for your final project submission. So you want to make doubly sure that you're creating these properly, and that you understand what needs to be included, and that you're checking them to make sure that they're being created properly also, and named properly. And otherwise, that would be the end of this exercise. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully this video helps you kind of navigate through this whole process.